Hey guys, welcome back to Parkitect. The station has been sitting in an empty grassy Greenland for over a week now, and it's about time that something's done to change that. So in this video I'll be working on the queue, actually add some scenery and buildings around it. A very small restaurant, which is really not that much, but you know, just a small something on the side, which is on the right of the screen at the moment. There will be a pagoda, which is actually quite cool, and some foliage and rockwork just to finish the ride itself off. Now I wanted to start off with the queue and actually cover that up for, well, one interesting reason. I thought it would be interesting to have it covered up and have all sorts of scenery in the shape of houses around it, instead of just leaving it, you know, be a normal queue that kind of just winds through a bit of forest or rockwork or things like that, since I want to get like a Japanese town atmosphere to this area, but it's kind of hard to get that in without any of the Japanese scenery items that you'd kind of want to have. There's just no Japanese scenery in the game yet, so no Japanese lanterns or fences or anything to really get that atmosphere going in the scenery. And so I thought the next best thing to get it into the park would just be to, you know, have the layouts of the buildings in there and try to get the atmosphere with the buildings as much as I can. So instead of, you know, having the queue go through some sort of, well, landscape that's supposed to be Japanese, I figured it would be cool to have it go underneath a building, which is a little unusual, especially for this park, because it's a bit more like what you would actually kind of see in real life, and something which I haven't really done in this park so far, in that it doesn't really work from a Parkitect perspective. But having a building like this and actually having the queue zigzag underneath it is more of a like real life thing. If you want to get rid of some fences, open up some ropes or close up some ropes to make the queue longer or shorter on, well, depending on whether it's a really busy or not so busy day. And from that kind of standpoint, I do guess it kind of works to have this building over here which the queue zigzags underneath. And it is also actually surprisingly functional for the park itself, because I did want to cut off the end of the park as much as I can, since the park border is very close to this here, and just leaving it be a forest kind of felt like it might be just a weird sort of end to this path. So this, you know, adds a bit more of like something, a building that's kind of in the distance and closes off the park border as you walk toward it. And I think that's quite nice. It also helps to get the layout of a Japanese theme a bit more in this general area, because I do want to lay out everything a bit like it's a Japanese town, to at least get that atmosphere going. That's also where the pagoda and the small restaurant is gonna come in quite handy, which I'll build in a second after I'm done with these rocks. You actually see quite a bit of rockwork in this video, and some of it is really the smaller kind of rockwork, just placing some smaller rocks to get some detailing in, but quite a bit of it is also really the large rocks that are pretty much just used to make the big cliff facades, which you don't really get in the game because, well, the way the terraforming system works, obviously. But I did want to get some in to get that, you know, Japanese mountain kind of atmosphere into the park. Now this is the small restaurant building, restaurant-ish kind of thing. It's just a really small one of those corners where you just get like a bit of food and sit down on a picnic table or some sort of table outside. Only catch is, of course, that Parkitect, at least vanilla, at least at the moment, doesn't have any tables, which makes restaurants in general quite a bit hard and practically impossible to get right in vanilla. And why I haven't really been doing it so far and just pretty much stuck to the stalls. But the problem is that this area here was quite a bit empty. Like, it's a very long stretched out patch of grass, which I didn't want to, you know, just add trees to, because that just seemed like a waste of space. It also seemed like a waste of the coaster layout, like it would just go through the forest and not really have any interaction with scenery or paths. So I did want to fill it in, but it's just way too, well, narrow for a flat ride to fit in nicely, and it's a bit too big to just have a random path to kind of just explore the area. So I thought the next best thing would be to just add a quick restaurant to it. It's nothing big, especially when it comes to, well, obviously the size of the building, but also when it comes to the style of it. I really felt it was maybe a bit too small to actually get a Japanese style into the building. It's, well, probably very theme park Japanese anyway. But it's also hard to get, you know, especially on a scale like this, get the Japanese elements into the building. The Japanese roofs and shapes that you commonly see on buildings. So it's more or less in the colors and on the walls that I think it did turn out quite okay. But on the shape of the building itself, it's almost like a bit of a mixture between a Japanese townhouse and like one of these bigger villas for the samurai people that you would see. I don't exactly know the Japanese names, but it's a bit of a strange mishmash of theme park Japanese probably in the end. But at least I wanted to get that in here, just to have something going into this area of this part of the park. And it also was a nice way to get some more scenery into this part, since, you know, have a small path going over here was just having a good excuse to get extra flowers or extra plants and all sorts of scenery go next to the park, go next to the path, which also adds up to, you know, more scenery around the coaster track and just an area that fits, well, more nicely together in the end, I think. And just to sort of overcome the lack of picnic tables or tables and chairs in the game, I thought it would be cool to add like those very small squares with benches around it, but it does look a little bit weird. I may want to look at that at some point in the future. I just thought, you know, it's the next best thing, since we only have benches in the game at the moment. Even though the shop itself is actually not even functional, I definitely need to get my act together and actually place a store in this thing at some point in the future, because I totally forgot about that. So yes, at the moment it is not functional, and I was hoping to actually get a small shop into it so that people could actually buy some stuff and, I don't know, eat or drink something, but I completely forgot about the one thing that I built this building for. So that's something you'll see in the future, no need to worry about it, but yeah, I just forgot it. I just forgot it at this point in time. The gardening around it is quite interesting as well. One of the reasons why I wanted to do it in this like little bit different way than the rest of the park is, you know, really to get those subtle differences in the foliage in between the different parts. Like, I obviously don't want to have completely different foliage because this is still one park in one physical location. But, you know, get some very small hints toward the countries that the areas are from in every area of the park. So here the foliage is a little bit Japanese, which you kind of start to see right here, with a few more of the red trees and very small round bushes. What I always found really interesting about Japanese gardens is like how flowy it all is. Like, there are all sorts of bushes. Many of them are really like ball shaped, and they all sort of flow over the environment. It's really hard to explain it, but you know, when you kind of contrast it with European gardening, where European is just like, it's all decoration and it's large and symmetrical and planned out, and everything is like very man-made. Japanese gardening feels a bit more natural, a bit more like it just kind of flows with what's around it, which is pretty cool, and which I am not sure how I can really get that feeling into a grid game like this, but well, at least I tried. There are actually some ways in which I'll try it a bit more in the future. Somebody gave me the really awesome tip. I don't remember who it was, but I definitely want to return to it in the next episode, in which I hope to do it. To lower trees into the ground and, you know, use the top of a tree as a bush, which I didn't really know is very possible in Parkitect, but you can just, at least at the moment, terraform to have a small pit, then place a tree inside that pit, then raise the land up again to actually have a lowered tree, so you can actually get some slightly bigger bushes, or bushes with different textures, and it can be quite fun and useful. So that's something that I want to mess around in the next episode, or maybe some episodes after that. And definitely something that you might want to mess around with if you're a bit into foliage as well, or if you want to, you know, break away a little bit from the somewhat limited amount of foliage that we have in the game so far. Now to actually catch up with the time-lapse again. At this point I wanted to build the pagoda, which ended up taking quite a while. I think one of the biggest challenges with this pagoda is that it had to look like a pagoda from an isometric perspective, yet at the same time I did want it to be shaped like a pagoda, which might sound a bit strange, but it basically, the issue is that I obviously needed full tile roofs that stick out from the building to be like those square-shaped roofs which stick out from a pagoda. but I also wanted the walls to be visible because, you know, the walls are gonna give an idea of what the color scheme of this building is, and that it's actually a pagoda with a tower in the middle of it. And a couple of like test pagodas that I built just to see how this would work out. Like the roofs were too close together and you couldn't even see the walls because the roofs stick out a full tile, and you know the height between the floors needs to be quite high to actually be able to still see the walls of the tower itself. So there was a bit of a struggle with getting that height right, and then there was also the issue of getting the well, the textures of the walls themselves right, because I did want to have this white wall with red woodwork kind of pagoda, which, you know, is obviously very heavily inspired by a pretty famous pagoda in Kyoto, which I don't exactly remember the name of and I suck at pronouncing it, but it's basically very inspired by that. Just a red pagoda with some brown roofs to form a nice centerpiece to this area. It's actually at the crossing too of two paths that lead into this area, and so it's more or less like a big welcome sign and a big thing that sort of towers over the rest of the area. Just a big weenie in general, basically. Now I think this is how I ended up having the pagoda in the end, with, I'm not entirely sure, but about 6 or 7 steps difference in height between the roofs. You know, just to be able to see each individual roof, while at the same time also keeping the walls a little bit bare, just enough to see that there are walls inside, and just enough to see as well the little pattern on the walls, though you barely really see the windows that I put on there, only if you really go out of the regular isometric perspective and into, you know, just straight looking at it. But yeah, this is the pagoda. Nothing really big, though it technically is a pretty big building, but it does serve as a pretty nice centerpiece to this area, and I hope it'll all bring it together a little bit more in the future, because as you can see I do have like some still empty pieces of land around the pagoda which I want to fill in with buildings in the future, and I'm hoping that those should tie into the building of the pagoda quite nicely as well. Now the last thing that I wanted to do is make a small lake around the coaster, or well, more precisely right underneath it, and have a mountain right next to it, which is going to be most of the scene of the roller coaster. What I wanted to do with the roller coaster is make sure that it's quite visible, so you can see it from the path that sort of runs alongside the water and the Enterprise here, while at the same time I wanted the coaster to be a terrain conforming inverts, much like, you know, Nemesis and Black Mamba, and to a little bit of an extent I still think it's quite a bit like Alpengeist as well. And it's those sort of two things which made me think that it would be best to have a big mountain right underneath the lift hill, just so that the track can stay quite close to the ground at all times, while at the same time, you know, the entire coaster is going to be visible from the paths where you can kind of walk around underneath the coaster. And, you know, so in the end it'll be a nice terrain conforming ride for the coaster itself, while not being too you know, invisible from the paths. I think maybe a bit of an issue with some terrain coasters like Boulder Dash, especially at the beginning, has like some very hidden in the trees and the hills kind of parts of the layout. Nemesis has the same with some parts of it, though it is quite visible, and it goes for Black Mamba as well. As soon as you have like something that conforms to the terrain, you can't really stay close to the paths or very visible at all times. But I did want this coaster to be quite visible, and that's why placing it on the side of this hill felt like a good way to sort of get that in. And what will hopefully help with that is going to be the rockwork, and sweet Jesus, it's gonna be a lot of rockwork. It's basically going to fill this entire side of the hill, and it did feel like a pretty big risk. Like at the time I just sort of jumped into it like YOLO. I'm just gonna place rocks all over the side of this hill and see how it turns out for the park. But there was a bit of an idea behind it. I thought it would be cool to have some rockwork instead of the terrain in the game itself, since, you know, you can't really get any steep slopes. But even though while this isn't really too steep of a slope, I wanted to have a really steep cliff face right underneath the lift hill to sort of give you a wall as a background, a sort of backdrop to have the coaster run against. And, yeah, you can't really do that with the terrain since it's, well, not very steep. And especially this hill is almost like a roller coaster tycoon 1 hill. It's just a very square-ish hill with some steps. It's almost like you could have some rice plantations on the side of it. And yeah, I didn't really want to have that sort of hill. I wanted it to be quite rocky, quite steep. More like a cliff face than a gentle grassy hill. And the only real option to do that seemed to be to just have a lot of rockwork on top of it. So this is like that really massive rockwork to sort of sculpt a mountain here instead of just the smaller details. Though at this point I'm getting into the details as well, adding some small rocks all around this, just to make it look a bit more interesting than just one big collection of huge rocks. Actually get some smaller boulders in there and there, and they also help to kind of connect it to the rest of the area. I always like to, when I do my rock work, have some smaller rocks that sort of scatter around the larger rocks, especially on the bottom of it, kind of like the pebbles that break out of rocks in real life and that you see kind of collecting in these streams of sand and small rocks that you see underneath real rock facades. And it just all connects it a little bit more to the sand, because having large rocks and to the sand, it kind of connected more to the grass area around it, because having like really big rocks right next to grass with no way of a real transition just very often seems very like abrupt and very sudden, and like it doesn't really fit together and glide into each other very smoothly. And I think the small rocks can help quite a bit with that as well. I also like to do it in this order because you know, it's a lot easier if you kind of start off with sculpting out the general shape of the rockwork that you want to make with very large rocks first, and then get into the detailing and, you know, making the rocks look nice on the outside by using the smaller rocks to get that bit of texturing in. And most of the time is definitely gonna stick in making the small rocks and adding those all around it, and it's quite a bit of a tedious process as well, especially if you're way too perfectionist and picky like I am sometimes. Like, you can sink quite a bit of time into placing these very small rocks all around the sides and having like the placements of them just right. But I was quite happy with how it looked at this point. Now, it did look like one very big grey blob, which doesn't really mix well into the rest of the area at this point. So adding some trees to it, I thought would help to make this blend in a little bit nicer with the park and make this a little bit less like one big grey barren wasteland of rock. And the trees are falling over because of heavy gravity of pause mode at the moment, which does make it a little harder to, you know, get an idea of what it looks like. Though I still like to play on paused mode. I'm not really sure where that really comes from. It's a bit of a habit actually from other games which do have a day and night mode. At least vanilla, that's, you know, you sort of want to have a certain time of day, but I guess over here I didn't really want the rain to appear, and it appeared like a little bit ago, and I didn't want to really have to deal with that again, because, you know, you can see things a little bit more clearly when it's not raining. So I put up with the very strange looking trees for, well, a couple of times just before going back to real time for a little bit, and have them actually, you know, go back into the position that they should be. I do hope this bug, which I also think appeared quite recently, gets fixed at some point in the future, because it is quite strange, even though it can be really funny as well. Now, I'm obviously talking about that because this is pretty much just tree placement, and it's not that interesting. Just kind of standard trees, throwing in a couple of those red poplars, or yeah, they're poplars. A couple of those red poplars to get a bit more of a Japanese vibe to it. I thought it would be nicer to, you know, get some red regular trees in, maybe some other kind of colors, but it's really hard to fit those in when it comes to, you know, the space, since they are quite large and the poplars are just so easy to get into all sorts of small spaces. And especially around the rockwork here, I didn't want any trees that are half drowning in the rockwork. So it was quite tough to get them into the exact spaces, and I did want to have like most of the trees just be green pine trees to get a pine tree forest look to this part of the park, much like the rest of the park, just to have that fit into the climate which this is supposed to be in, even though I have no idea what the exact climate of this park would be, or where Cydonia Hills is even located. Like, what kind of country would even call a theme park Cydonia Hills? It doesn't really make any sense. By the way, yes, I did name it after Knights of Cydonia. But that's a story for another time actually, because this time lapse is ending. So maybe we'll have story time with Silver at some time later, but thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys next time.